All right, Crystal, what's on your radar?
Well, boys and girls, let me cut right to the chase here. Liberals' favorite billionaire hero, Bill Gates, is lying to you in a way that is profoundly harmful for lives in the global south and for your health right here in the U.S. Let me explain. So as you know, while the U.S. is doing pretty well on vaccine administration, with half of U.S. adults having received at least one dose, poor countries are in truly desperate shape. Somewhere around 3/4 of vaccine doses have been administered in just 10 high-income countries. Over 100 countries have yet to administer their very first dose. India, of course, has become the new ground zero for exploding COVID cases. The U.S. just recently lifted an embargo on the raw materials needed to help make COVID vaccines in that country and to improve their vaccination rates. But in general, it's a mess. And it's a mess for basically one simple reason: greed. Pharma wants to keep their profits high, and they have aggressively lobbied their home countries in the U.S. and in the EU to make sure that they can achieve that goal, protecting their patent monopolies so that generic versions of their life-saving vaccines cannot be manufactured, which would both increase supply and lower the cost. They have had an extraordinarily powerful ally in that fight to protect their bottom line: human lives be damned, our own supposed savior of global public health, Bill Gates. Now, Gates has been pushing a solution to poor nation vaccine distribution that conveniently protects pharma profits. That is the COVAX program through the World Health Organization, where rich countries donate to secure doses for middle-income and low-income nations. Sounds good maybe in theory, but in practice, it's been a joke. They set a goal of 2 billion doses, which would still, by the way, be insufficient to meet the need. But they have instead provided a pathetic 38 million doses. Has this dramatic underperformance led Bill Gates to rethink his approach? Because let's not kid ourselves, by dint of his money and his connection, he has essentially appointed himself the unofficial world czar of public health. The answer of whether he's rethought it is, of course, not a chance. In an interview on Sky News, Bill Gates was asked whether it would be helpful to lift vaccine patent protections in order to increase access. Here is his answer.
There's been some speculation that the changing intellectual property rules and allowing these vaccines, as you say, the recipe for these vaccines to be shared would be helpful. Do you think that would be helpful?
No.
Why not?
Well, there's only so many vaccine factories in the world, and people are very serious about the safety of vaccines. And so moving something that had never been done, moving a vaccine from, say, a J&J factory into a factory in India, that it's novel. It's only because of our grants and our expertise that can happen at all. The thing that's holding things back in this case is not intellectual property. There's not like some idle vaccine factory with regulatory approval that makes magically safe vaccines. You've got to do the trials on these things, and every manufacturing process has to be looked at in a very careful way. There's all sorts of issues around intellectual property having to do with medicines, but not in terms of how quickly we've been able to ramp up the volume here. I remember how shocked people were when we said we were going to do second sources in these developing country factories. That was a novel thing. And we got all the rights from the vaccine companies. They didn't hold it back. They were participating. I do a regular phone call with the pharmaceutical CEOs to make sure that work is going at full speed.
So let's just unpack what he says there. His argument is that lifting patent protections will not help the supply problem whatsoever. So it's better to just stay the course and produce at the current level and hope that eventually rich countries donate enough money and surplus vaccines that poor countries get taken care of. In his words, it's not like there's some idle vaccine factory with regulatory approval that makes magically safe vaccines. Oh, really? I present to you this article from the AP. In an industrial neighborhood on the outskirts of Bangladesh lies a factory with gleaming new equipment imported from Germany. Its immaculate hallways lined with hermetically sealed rooms. It's operating at just a quarter of its capacity. It is one of 3 factories that the AP found on 3 continents whose owners say they could start producing hundreds of millions of COVID-19 vaccines on short notice if only they had the blueprints and the technical know-how. I present also to you John Fulton, president of BioLease in Canada, who says he could be making millions of doses today if the know-how had been shared. We've been passed over. We've got this production capacity and it's not being put to use. If we had started this last year, we could have shipped millions of doses by now. This is supposed to be like a wartime effort, everyone in it together, but That does not seem to be the case. And finally, I present to you the words of Manuel Martin, a policy advisor to Doctors Without Borders. The Gates organization dampened early enthusiasm by saying that IP is not an access barrier in vaccines. That's just demonstratively false. Demonstratively false. Bill Gates is lying to you when he says that lifting patent protections will not help with access. Now look, it may not magically fix everything. Nothing is a cure-all, but it is a root cause of the problem, and it would help to ease the supply issue so that poor countries can start vaccinating, and we can all avoid the horror of watching the virus mutate to the point where it jumps the current vaccines. Bill Gates, with his billions, set the course for how global vaccine distribution would unfold, and now millions of people around the world are paying the price. Now, for those who've been tracking Gates' actions in the public health space for decades, these new comments will come as absolutely no surprise, as journalist Alexander Zaitchik writes over at TNR. Since Gates got involved in the AIDS epidemic in Africa in the late 90s, he has cultivated close relationships with big pharma execs, lauded their wonderful and noble efforts, and aggressively pushed industry-friendly policies with regards to patents. This significantly set back access to AIDS antiretroviral therapies, and it has been a disaster for COVID vaccine access. Gates' pro-industry stance also should come as no surprise, given that the man is a billionaire uber capitalist who made his own ill-gotten fortune by novel exploitations of patent law and unchecked monopoly power. Now, he may sincerely want to cure disease and make the world a better place. He also has a sincere ideological commitment to protecting monopolies and profit margins for some of the world's worst actors, and that he doesn't seem to care what the consequences are. He and pharma argue that patents help foster innovation, which creates the life-saving drugs that we all benefit from. This, too, is largely a lie. Every new drug developed over the past decade was funded by U.S. taxpayers. The revolutionary mRNA technology that pharma is so worried about monopolizing now was developed by university researchers and scientists at the NIH and the Department of Defense. Now, I know we've got a complicated love-hate relationship with billionaires in this country, but maybe, just maybe, it is not such a great idea to outsource global public health policy to a rapacious monopolist. Maybe, just maybe, it's not such a great idea to outsource labor market conditions and unionization rates to another rapacious monopolist at Amazon. Maybe we shouldn't be outsourcing free speech and censorship to another set of monopolists in Silicon Valley. Perhaps these men are good people. Maybe they're not good people. Maybe they're well-intentioned. Maybe they're not. But no one voted for them to be king of the world. They are totally unaccountable to a single soul. And every one of them is committed to existing power because they are existing power. Sagar, back when we covered that poll about billionaires, liberals love Bill Gates, right? I mean, he has intentionally created this incredible halo around him. And I'm not going to say he hasn't done good in the world.
He's done a lot of good.
This isn't to even judge him personally, although I do a little bit of judging him personally here. But the bigger story here is about why do these individual billionaires have so much power? And these are the type of devastating consequences that can result. Look, this was entirely predictable from the beginning. And if you rewind back to the beginning, there was a lot of talk about a people's vaccine and making sure that we were in a wartime effort to get vaccine supplies when they're developed, not just to the rich world, but around the globe, because that risk is real for absolutely everyone, even if you don't care what's happening in India or other places around the world. Bill Gates really set the course here, saying, no, we're going to go with this COVAX program through the World Health Organization. It protects pharma profits. Rich countries are going to donate. That thing has been a total joke and a total disaster, dramatically underperforming their targets, which were already inadequate. Clearly, if we would lift the patent protections, no, it wouldn't be a cure-all. But when he says it wouldn't do anything, that it has nothing to do with supply, I mean, that is just such a provably false absurdity.
No, it's true. And it's because the Gates people, the Gates Foundation and more, are deeply tied in with the pharma industry. And what really puzzles me about this is if he's true to his word, then lifting patent protection on mRNA would be probably one of the greatest gifts to curing malaria that's happened. I was just talking about this the other day. There's a new mRNA malaria vaccine. people may not know this, vaccinating against malaria is very difficult. It's actually not particularly effective. One of the largest killers, along with HIV, in the third world. That's what he dedicated his life to. And yet, he got here. And like you said, look, Bill Gates personally has literally saved millions of people. So, I don't want to say that that's not the case. But it is a broader question. There's a new controversy, I don't know if you guys know about this, where Gates is funding research in order to literally dull the sun, in order to try and affect greenhouse gas emissions. Now, maybe it's a good idea. It's called controversial technology called solar geoengineering. This is all in Popular Mechanics. You can go look it up. I'm not a conspiracy
theorist.
It's
not some weird Gates conspiracy.
Here's the problem. Who decides? That sounds like something we should maybe all have a consensus around, the World Health Organization or the WTO or something, the UN, and everybody signs on instead of somebody creating this technology, trying to deploy it if they want to. I mean, do we even have, if somebody wanted to, you can launch whatever the hell you want up into space. Seriously. I mean, there's not really a lot of governing bodies around this stuff, and pretty much any government, in the third world or whatever, let you do anything you want for $60 million. So is that something you want to allow? And this is about power, which is that it's do you want the ability of a single person in order to literally dull the sun? I'm exaggerating, but I'm also not, because it's actually possible.
It sounds like the plot of a bad Austin Powers movie,
except
where
it's
the
true,
villain is going to single-handedly dim the sun for the entire planet. And yet, that is what is happening. And again, look, I want to be clear here. There's a lot of stupid, crazy Bill Gates conspiracy theories out there.
There's nothing about 5G.
We have nothing to do with that, right? And he's not implanting chips in you with the vaccine, or I don't even know what the conspiracies are. This is the factual information reported out and his own comments about what he thinks about patent protection. So on the one hand, I'm sure he has saved a lot of lives.
Yes.
On the other hand, right now, his actions are risking millions of lives, because the fact that they had this patent protection in place from the very beginning means all of those factories and more around the globe that could have spun up to produce hundreds of millions, if not more, doses of vaccine are totally unable to operate. And he, maybe more than anyone else, is the architect of the direction of the vaccine distribution. And look, we also got to say, the Trump administration policy was the same as now the Biden administration policy. They are blocking an effort at the World Trade Organization to temporarily lift these patent protections. And I just have to always say that what they will argue is, we need the patent protection so we can do research and development. That's why we have it. They didn't develop this technology. mRNA was developed by U.S. government public taxpayer funds. Every single new pharmaceutical in the last 10 years was developed by public funding. So don't believe their propaganda and their lies. They, by and large, are not the ones doing the life-saving research here. The public is creating the good, and the private sector is reaping the profits. That's what's really going on.
There you go.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.